She had a polyculture home kitchen garden, or huerto familiar. She knew wild plants and their medicinal and nutritional properties. She was an ardent seed saver and understood the importance of selecting the best and most diverse set of seeds for the next season. She once told me, la semilla es la memoria de la planta de cómo crecer y vivir en esta tierra. That's a great definition of a seed. She warned me to stay away from the Chacon Creek because it was filled with untreated sewage, and she had observed other neighborhood children getting sick after playing in the tainted waters. In other words, my grandmother was a scientist. She had tremendous ethno-ecological and agroecological knowledge. Indeed, most of the communities I work with have this sort of knowledge that some researchers have come to call kitchen table science, because women gathered in the kitchen to discuss the patterns and problems of life they observe in their own neighborhoods are the ones that more often do it. We have in most states, including California, an administrative culture in the fields of environmental protection and regulation that is really a cult of experts. These experts, in that white, typically do not understand or value local, place-based knowledge. In fact, the current regime for environmental impact studies, risk science, and the like is dedicated to the single-minded pursuit of the presumably neutral and objective quantitative measurement known as cost-benefit analysis. I'm sure everyone in this room has sat in on hearings where that was the case. This reduction of data and analysis to number-crunching exercises that too often turn out to be based on incomplete, finagled, or tainted data obscures many of the other factors associated with the perception of risk and risk management. The cult of expertise and its fetish for cost-benefit analysis thus usually dismisses or disqualifies the local knowledge of people like my grandmother who have no professional or specialized training other than that which is part of their received cultural capital. Experts are privileged in their positions of authority, and this often means that we will end up with an incomplete understanding of a given situation of environmental risk. This disregard for local place-based knowledge is a form of epistemological violence. It is based on blatant disregard for the knowledge people developed over time by living and working in place. Over the past 3 decades, I have often testified as an expert witness in various contexts: landfill permit hearings, environmental impact studies, Title VI actions, while we can still do them, all related to environmental protection. And in every single case, the experts for the corporations or the governmental stakeholders demeaned and dismissed local knowledge, laughing about how people spoke English, even though the knowledge they had about a particular pollutant may have exceeded the knowledge of the experts themselves. This is not just anti-democratic, it is anti-scientific and ill-advised, since too often, as I can vouch, this results in a mistaken decision based on faulty and incomplete data, steered by market-oriented interests. We have to resist the false participation process that leads into the cul-de-sac of the cost-benefit decision-making matrix. This leads to premeditated decisions based on the restrictive assumptions of quantitative data. I want to conclude my presentation by reference to the idea of restoring the commons in the age of the ecology of fear. This means discussing one last concept that we often take for granted, and this, of course, is the concept of the individual. All of our law, and indeed much of our social identity as Americans, is based on the concept of the individual and of individual rights. Yes, as an anthropologist, I can tell you that most of the indigenous or ethnic cultures of the world that I have worked with, none of these cultures has a word for the individual. Indeed, many of the native Mesoamerican people I work with along the West Coast from LA to Vancouver, British Columbia, originate from cultures that lack a word in their native language for individual. Yet our society, which is increasingly comprised of a multicultural mosaic, insists that the concept of the individual is indeed the key to our law, progress, and prosperity. Obviously, I beg to differ. In my own family and community, I have learned that the individual has not replaced the concept of the person as a being connected to others. Numerous Native American cultures also do not have a word for individual. They have words for person, being, and pronouns like we and us, but they do not have a word for individual. What does this mean? It means that we're in the midst of a long-standing conflict in areas of environmental protection that, while based on recognition of our collective responsibility, is still driven largely by individualist goals in a capitalist market economy. I often use the term ecology of fear to describe this situation. We are afraid of falling behind and not getting ahead. We are afraid to fail as individuals. We fear death from terrorism and natural catastrophe. We are afraid of the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we eat. All the substances that give us life now threaten to kill us. We are afraid of difference and see the immigrant or the native as a further threat to the American dream. Women are afraid to walk alone, day or night. Juarez and Tijuana have become massive killing fields, filled with the victims of rape and drug wars. This is the ecology of fear. How do we get to such a condition of environmental and social deprivation and degradation? Even in the midst of all this wealth, the rich are also afraid of losing it all or being stripped of their acquisitions by the less fortunate. The ecology of fear, like the endemic problems of structural violence and historical trauma that I have talked about today, is based on the cult of the individual rational actor. And yet it turns out the actor has acted rather selfishly and irrationally of late, even to the point of self-destruction. The environmental and justice advocates, environmental health practitioners, and environmental regulators gathered here today are to make a difference in moving toward a just and sustainable future. You will have to become indignant with a world rendered barren and distorted by this ecology of fear that I've just described. To challenge the ecology of fear, you will have to develop and explore more collective forms of action and mutual aid. You will have to trust in local, place-based knowledge and revalue meaningful, set from the get-go type of public participation. What I have witnessed over the past 3 decades is that when Latinas and Latinos organize themselves into institutions of collective action, we can create our own opportunities and freedoms based on the old-fashioned values of self-reliance and mutual aid that our grandparents needed to survive in times not unlike our own. If we go it alone, as individual automatons, well, sure, you may get ahead or maybe not, but whatever you do, your individual aggrandizement will do little for your community despite acts of charity. The environmental justice movement is a collective social action movement concerned with justice for all, not just individuals. And it is premised on the basic idea that the most important value of a human life is what it can contribute to the well-being of our community and our mother, the earth.
Gracias, Devin. Next, we are going to apply some of the concepts that have been presented throughout the morning. So what are the laws? Who is accountable? What resources are available? Where do we begin to rephrase and reframe the issue around environmental justice? And where does the application of these laws fit nationally, locally, regionally? And for that discussion to lead us to follow up on the foundation of this discussion, we're going to invite Mr. Gail Filter to come up and share with us some ideas about how these laws and applications can help us as we move forward. Gail has been a big advocate around environmental justice issues, and he's a government employee and civil servant working to make sure that laws are implemented, that we have regulations, and that hazardous waste is actually disposed appropriately here in the state of California. So I will invite him to come up and share his insights.